It's thinking.
It's thinking.
And there it
We're
is.
live. We're live. Hello, everybody, and welcome. We have a very important discussion that we've been asked to do because of the last one that we did. So we're going to be talking about elevating yourself on LinkedIn as a thought leader. And the real focus we're going to have today is around unique, an often overused term, but I think underestimated in the value. So let's introduce ourselves first. Nancy, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody watching?
Thank you, Dr. Nancy Zaire, sales whisperer, and
Absolute queen of
oh,
LinkedIn.
do you wanted
No,
me to
I
give
was
a
going to say,
fuller intro? I can definitely do that, but you know,
no, I was just teasing a little bit for everyone there. But Anthony Pearl, host of Podcast Done for You, where we make your podcasts happen very easily. Now, I think what we've got to get into straight away is something that we're both very passionate about, is this idea of being unique. And I think there are three things that really go into this category. And I think the things that people focus most on are the first two, which are not the ones that we want to focus on, but we need to touch on those first two, which is really the first one really is about it is simply about being controversial. That's what a lot of people associate with unique, isn't it?
it is. And people think that by having a controversial point of view, saying things that are offhanded, offbeat, off color, that somehow that will make them stand out in a crowded, noisy background of lots of other people who may have points of view and information similar to you.
Yeah, and I think there's that old adage: any publicity is good publicity. So people fall into that trap of saying, "Well, I've got to say something controversial." Now, at times there may be a need to be controversial, and for a valid reason. But going out there just to be controversial, so you attract people towards you, I don't think that is necessarily a great business decision. And that's what we're talking about: being a thought leader from a business point of view. So I think that leads into where people fall into, okay, I don't need to be controversial. I just need to be different. And that is also a trap, isn't it?
Yes, because different for the sake of differences, and again, the controversy for the sake of controversy doesn't really distinguish you or elevate your thought leadership. And you can come across as kind of like part of the Me Too, like everybody is having that point of view too. So these are kind of lame ways to really elevate your thought leadership and make people say, I'd like to get to know you better and understand what you do.
Yeah. And I think it's just being different. Also, I think this is one of the challenges, particularly for people these days, is saying, well, what I've actually just got to do is just change things slightly, and then that'll make me different. And that's the inclination as well when you're using tools like AI, where you're just saying, well, just write this in a different way. But writing it in a different way or expressing it just slightly differently doesn't necessarily make you unique, and it certainly doesn't make you a thought leader. I think the third category is where the most important one is, which is where we want to focus on, is to be unique, to stand out as a thought leader, to be able to elevate yourself. You have to express your experiences. That is what makes you unique, isn't it?
It is. And I was thinking earlier today as I was preparing for this program, I was thinking about artificial intelligence and how it is so ubiquitous. It's all over the place, and many people are using it, either to begin or to edit their thoughts. But AI cannot replace humans because of that a factor of experience, because each of us brings a wealth of education, experiences, background that is unique, and AI cannot possibly be able to capture some of those stories, certainly the passion and experiences that thought leaders have had. Would you agree?
Absolutely, and I think that's the power of humanity. And what draws people in towards you is your ability to tell stories in response to other people's either statements or stories. And I think if anyone is thinking about how you engage with people just in a social environment, someone will tell a story and you'll respond with your own story. And it may be a story that you've told 100 times before, but the way you tell it that particular time will be slightly different because you're
Mhm.
responding to the environment around you. It might be shorter, it might be longer, it might emphasize different points.
Mhm.
It's all of those things that make that particular time you're telling it unique, but
Mhm.
it also makes the story and the value that it adds unique. And that ultimately is an expression of your expertise and ultimately why people gravitate towards you and will see you as a thought leader.
And as you were speaking about that, Anthony, I was reflecting on the fact that you and I are speaking right now live. Perhaps our viewer is watching it live, but you could be watching it as a replay. And there's something about being alive in real time, you and I communicating, that again is so different and so captivating that cannot be uh, brought in together through an AI tool. It's something that happens in that moment. And as you said, whatever is going on between us, and if my dog barks or the doorbell rings or there's some other background event, that's going to get woven into this situation. And again, no AI tool would be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think people are often afraid of this kind of idea of being
Yeah.
live.
Mhm.
And really, we've fallen into this pattern in places, particularly in LinkedIn, of this necessity to be very edited. And I think that is a real danger, particularly when you're writing things. That there's very rarely that people write exactly as they would say it. They don't include the stumbles, the ums and ahs, the knows, and those sorts of things that we bring into our own language that make us who we are as an individual. So what happens is what you see on the screen is often really not only scripted, but very heavily edited and very heavily manipulated often by AI. Whereas in this kind of environment where you're doing something live, so there's not even a chance, we're not even editing this video. We're not, we may in time give you excerpts from this video and post that, which is fine. But what we're showing you now is a very unique way of presenting this. We haven't scripted this. We're not reading anything here. We're responding to each other and to what's happening. And I think that is something that is underestimated in its value of being unique and putting yourself out there, because that's what thought leadership is about, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And you reminded me of the fact that what they call real TV is very popular in the States. Is it also popular in Australia?
Not as popular here, no.
Okay, but I was thinking about why it is so popular, and it's for the very reasons you mentioned. There is no script, that whatever people are experiencing and doing in the moment is what is going on in the moment, and hence that emotion, that passion, or that lack thereof, or it's all captured right there with all its blemishes, without any hygienic doctoring up and sanitizing what people see. And I think that's what is missing in this AI world. And so, you, as a thought leader, uh, it is right now selfies and edited video and podcasts are gaining in popularity because they are so authentic.
Yeah, and I think you have to look as well at what's happening on LinkedIn. There's no doubt that video is being pushed more and more, and
Mhm.
none of us would be prepared to swear what the algorithm is doing on any given day. We're not about that. It's about elevating yourself, and I think that is the reason why it stands out, is because it allows you to be unique and to express who you are in your own way. Because when you read something on the page, of course, you can read it in lots of different ways and imagine how people may or may not be saying it. But when you're actually watching or listening to someone speaking, then you have no choice but to consume it in the way that it's being delivered. And that is the uniqueness as well, the personality. But I think it also brings in one other point as far as unique is concerned and elevating yourself, something that people are very much afraid of doing because everybody wants to be everything to everybody instead of choosing a unique niche. And I know this is a subject that's very dear to you, Nancy, that there's been
Yeah.
the few people that are that you've encountered recently that are very afraid of doing exactly that.
Yeah, you're right. This is something that's very near and dear to me because I recognize that many of the prospects and clients that I work with are afraid of narrowing down and that the net will be too narrow and therefore they won't get business. And just the opposite happens, Anthony, that by casting that broad net, asking for anyone and everyone, no one comes to mind. You can't think of it. Earlier today, I did a survey, and the survey tool had one of those open-ended questions, just name stuff. I couldn't name a thing. Nothing came to mind. Did that mean that there I had no answers for that category? I'm sure the answers existed, but when you do this broad net, you're getting no one because people don't identify and say, gee, that's me. It sounds like me.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that if you want to engage with your audience, and we're talking to thought leaders today, and we're talking particularly to professional services space, and even more particularly to those of you in the B2B space, this is where this is relevant. Now, does some of these things apply to other spaces? Yes, but that's not who we're focusing on today. And I think it's really important to have that niche because it enables you to do what we referred to earlier, but I think what is really important is being able to respond with stories that are going to engage with your different audiences. And as we alluded to before, that your stories will vary in the way you tell them depending on who's in front of you. And that's what's important to be thinking about in terms of your audience. Where you focus is really important. And I think there's a lot of business coaches that talk very heavily about asking the right questions. But I would argue as well, it's about telling the stories in the right way, which is equally as important because it's one story responding to the next story, which is what enables you to engage with people.
Yeah. And as I'm listening to you, obviously, I'm stimulated and provoked about different thoughts to share. And one of them is about listening, because listening is such an important and often underrated skill, which many thought leaders bring to the table and don't even realize perhaps how important that is to serving their audience. But it is that ability to be present in the moment, to tune in with all your, presence, your being, hear what people are saying, and then either feed it back to them in a way that continues, like you say, the storytelling, or maybe takes a twist or a turn to help them see things in a new perspective. So that listening skill and tuning in is vital before you can even tell a story.
Absolutely. I think you have to be aware of who is in front of you and who you want to be speaking to. And that's the nature of then what you give people. I think often it's underestimated by simple things that you give away in a story. For example, if we're telling a story about working with a massive corporate and and standing in front of 1,000 people, that is not relevant to another audience that we may have that maybe just have 5 or 10 staff, for example. So you have to be aware the nuances that happen in the way that you tell your stories, and again, you'll vary those stories depending on who is in front of you and who you want to attract. And I think that's a really important thing to always be aware of. If we're going back to this whole idea of how you elevate yourself as a thought leader and the importance of the word unique, it is understanding who your unique audience is and sharing experiences with that unique audience in a way that is
Mhm.
designed to engage them.
Exactly, with thinking about them in mind and how that can help them. Um, and recently, I've been working with a client who is focused on working with CEOs and people who are in that C-suite arena. And for her, it's again, it is about telling stories, but it also requires her uniqueness has to do with opening her heart and sharing not only her experiences so that the stories support someone, but also letting that individual know he or she is not alone because there is a lot of loneliness in that C suite.
100%. And I think that leads to a very important other aspect of being unique is being vulnerable. And in whatever that may mean, in whatever context that is for you in a particular story, but it's showing your vulnerability and your ability to respond and how you did things. And we all learn from our mistakes. So why not share some of those as well and say, well, I did this and it led to this, but I went and did this to correct it, for example. Being vulnerable with your audience makes you human, makes people want to more engage with you even more. And that's where you understand that you're picking up on these things and we're all learning all the time. And I think that's an important thing to make your audience aware of. There's a real difference between, for example, being asked to present at a very high level because you're already established as a thought leader and telling a kind of perfect scenario. And even then, I've heard most of those people be quite vulnerable in the way that they tell those stories. If you're talking about a TEDx speak, for example. But I think that particularly on LinkedIn, being vulnerable is something that people gravitate towards because they understand that you've been through things and that you've had experiences, and that's what draws you in. It's the personality, it's the uniqueness of the individual, because as they say, people buy from people.
That's right. And again, you triggered a story in my own mind having to do with vulnerability. When you have not processed an issue and you've not digested it thoroughly and you've gotten the value from it, so to speak, and you go to tell a story, that vulnerability doesn't come across as vulnerability. So the way to be vulnerable is you need to have a perspective. You need to have risen above it and kind of have that 30,000-foot view of what happened, even if it was a failure, so to speak. And I'm thinking about, situations that didn't turn out the way you might have wanted or intended. And yet, did you think about and process and work through that so that you're in a different place now to share that story?
Yeah, I think it is so important. And I think, no, we've just got to start wrapping things up here. Uh, but I think that being vulnerable and being open to how things are going and how you're responding to things really makes people attracted towards you. And whether that's the good or the bad, I think that's an important aspect of why people want to come towards you. So I think in wrapping things up, this whole idea of being unique has multi layers, and it is a term that, as we said at the beginning, that I think is often overused. People talk about, be unique, and they don't really think about what it means. And I think if you have listened to us today, then in order to elevate yourself as a thought leader on LinkedIn, that word unique is incredibly important. And as we said at the beginning, it's not about being controversial or being different for the sake of being different. It's about finding what is an expression of your experiences, sharing stories, sharing it to a niche audience, and being vulnerable in the way you do it.
Mhm. And so, Anthony, I know the reason why you and I have teamed up together and are presenting is because we are passionate and dedicated to help thought leaders elevate their thought leadership. And we have, both of us, of course, have put a stake in the sand. On LinkedIn, we have nearly 10,000 followers each. Clearly, we have developed our thought leadership. Hence, we're in a position now to help others do the same. And my heart goes out to the person. As you know, I have a PhD, and I got a PhD in a field which many people went out to practice solo. However, none of my education prepared me for what it would be like to actually have a successful business to market and sell my services. And I have struggled. I've gone up, I've gone down in terms of thinking about how that's done. And both of us have worked on ourselves individually, but we now have a path that can help the next person get a leg up and do it more quickly, and hence shorten that learning curve.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we are very happy to do is to, for, virtual sense, hold people's hands.
Mhm,
I think there's a lot of time that people, out there trying to be a thought leader, trying to express themselves and elevate themselves are left to do it themselves or just watch how-to videos and think that this is what I've got to do. And it seems like a massive mountain to climb.
mhm,
And we're in a position where we want to help people and we want to help a select group of people. I think we've said that we've got capacity at the moment to have 5 people who are prepared to nominate to stick up their hands and come and talk to us. There is nothing more than just putting up your hand and saying, yes, I'd like to learn more. And let's see if we can work together with you and show you how to not just show you, work with you to actually make it happen, to implement strategies that will elevate you as a thought leader. These are things that, as Nancy said, both of us have practiced and preached ourselves. We know what is working. We understand how to raise that level of awareness of who you are and who the right people are that you should be attracting. And hopefully that's the reason why you're sitting and watching this today.
yeah. And so I'm just going to give a little snippet of what I'm going to bring to the table. And Anthony, I'm going to invite you to do the same, because my expertise will be in helping you identify that ideal audience and identify them with such a robust description that you will have the right words and the right message that will attract them and make it much easier for you to, again, elevate yourself and endear yourself to that audience. And your contribution?
Absolutely. My contribution is going to be how you engage with those audiences, how you share stories, and really turning that into not just a simple sharing on LinkedIn, but in a way that is an educational and nurturing sequence that is going to continue to foster those relationships, because ultimately it is about relationship building. It's not about just posting. If you think it's just about posting and putting things up 3 times a week, that's just not enough. And it's not going to get you where you want to be. It is part of the equation, but is not all of the equation. And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. So, the combination of what we do is really going to make a significant difference. And as we said, we will hold your hands through the process. We work with you. We don't just say, this is a set of instructions. See you later. Go and do it yourself. It's really about working with 5 people and making a real difference to you. So if that's you, then all you have to do is reach out to either of us in a direct message. You can leave a comment where you've seen this if you like, but we welcome your connection and we'd love to work with you. So, if you want to be one of those 5 people, then definitely raise your hand as soon as possible, because we know from past experience when we did this that those places fill pretty quickly.
All right. To your sales success, this is Dr. Nancy Zaire, the Sales Whisperer. And
Anthony Pearl from Podcast Done For You.